So I gotta say, this guy that we're having on tonight, such an inspirational person. He's got an incredible podcast, which is the first place that I heard of him, called the Rising Man Podcast. Then I actually got to see him live. I did this online virtual retreat with the Sacred Sons, which is a men's group. I was outside in my little trailer, holed up, screaming out loud and like pounding my chest with Jeddy on screen. And I just knew that I wanted to have him here with us on the Sandia channel for Wellness Wednesday, because I feel like he's an energy that you guys just have to check out. He is a rites of passage guide. He's a mentor and leadership coach. He's impacted the lives of just hundreds and hundreds of men at this point. He's the founding father of Conscious Man Brotherhood. He's a lead coach in Man Cave and Unleash the Beast in King's Court, which are all incredible things that really help with leadership with men. But I think what's kind of cool is despite everything that Jeddy does, he still feels the best roles and the most important roles that he plays is as a husband and as a father. So please, in the chat, please type in welcome Jeddy Azuma. Hi, Jeddy.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I see we got people all over the world on here, man. It's awesome.
That's the cool thing, man. Like, we have such an international audience. We got people from every corner watching. So yes, it could be morning, it could be evening, it could be daytime. You don't know.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I'm honored to be here, man. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to drop into today.
For sure. You know, we were kind of chatting beforehand, and, you know, if you're out there and you've kind of noticed this too, drop it in the chat. But this thing of being home, especially in the beginning when we were in full lockdown, I think this put a lot of relationships to the test, not just like intimate relationships, but just friendships and business relationships. So what have you kind of seen within relationships during this past year?
Well, I just know within my own relationship, I've been married for 6.5 years to my lovely wife, Carrie. And this is one of the most challenging and the most rewarding and fulfilling years that we've had in our marriage so far. You know, I think it's that age-old saying that challenge and adversity reveals character.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really what a lot of us are learning about ourselves, first and foremost, as individuals, and also in relationship.
Yes.
Because what's harder than being stuck inside with your significant other? And nowhere to escape to. No, you can't run to the movies. You can't run to the bar, wherever you like to go to escape. And so what I've seen is a lot of people, there's a lot of divorces, a lot of separations, a lot of breakups, also a lot of people having children and getting pregnant right now. It's a really interesting time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people are looking for connection in some places, and then in some places they're actually overloaded with connection. So it's kind of a dual sort of, I guess it's really just that space of being uncomfortable. Because even for me, like, I lived about 2 weeks or 2 weekends out of the month, I lived on the road. And then, of course, as COVID hit, and it was like, no, all your education is going to be right here in the studio. You know, my wife was used to having me gone 2 weekends out of the month. And we have a great relationship where she was actually like, yeah, go have fun. Like, because she likes sci-fi movies and like horror movies and stuff that I don't like. So she's like, yeah, give me a weekend of this time off. And I think in the beginning, it was like, wow, this is so cool. We have so much more time together. And as it went on, it's like, you know, there's something about that thing of like distance makes the heart grow fonder. And just recently we had a conversation where it's like, you know, yeah, there's something about that feeling of going away, coming home, and feeling that sense of like, wow, I really missed you. Like, that's important, I think, to certain relationships.
Yeah. And like I said before, there's nowhere to hide, right? And so we had to face off with all those things that we could run from before. And I think a lot of people found out that there's more to this thing called being in a relationship than I actually thought there was. I think in a lot of cases, there's people who are realizing it's not what I actually thought this was. Now that we're here, we're sitting here looking at it. I think it's a great thing, because look at how unusual the circumstances are, right? As humans, we're not meant to be boxed up, holed up, only interacting with a handful of people at best on a day-to-day basis. We're not biologically engineered for that. So if you're in a relationship that can withstand that, and you go deeper instead of withdraw and try to escape into the closet or somewhere you can hide from your partner, then it's ultimately going to strengthen and fortify the bond that you have. And of course, it's going to reveal anything that has been unsettled or unresolved before. It's either going to break you apart or it's going to bring you closer together.
And that can be the challenging thing because, like you said, there's kind of nowhere to hide. So these things, when they come to the forefront, now we have a choice we have to make.
Yeah.
Do we actually sit down and have the conversation, or do we just like sit next to each other and just act like, well, I guess it's kind of out there, but we're still going to ignore it?
Yeah. And, you know, my wife and I, we're both coaches. We're both leaders. We've been doing this for like 10 years. She's been doing it longer than I have. And so we know the value of having an objective party to help navigate relationship. And we've done it ever since before we got married. And this year particularly, we doubled down on that. We hooked up with our relationship coach, said, hey, there's some things that are bubbling up to the surface. We also have small children. We got a 5-year-old and a 19-month-old now. So this year, with really small kids stuck in the house all day long, brought all of our stuff to the surface. But we knew enough, and I give credit to my wife because I'm stubborn. I'm like, nah, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna charge ahead. And she's like, let's get some help. Let's just get somebody to listen to where we're at. And I tell you what, man, it completely changed the game for us. It took our relationship to a level that it's never been before. So while some people are freaking out and running for the hills and just trying to jump from one relationship to the next, we're going deeper this year. And I'm so grateful for that. I feel so fortunate because I know a lot of people don't know that resource is out there.
Yeah. I mean, how does one find a relationship coach, and what does that look like? Like what does one do with a relationship coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, anybody who wants to know who we work with, I'd be happy to tell you. There's a woman named Erica Vargas. She's amazing. You know, I'll post her up, shout her out anywhere. She's awesome. But there's a lot of men and women out there who advertise themselves as relationship coaches, even relationship therapists. It doesn't even have to be in the coaching realm. Just somebody who is willing to support you navigating your relationship difficulties, because it's just like everything else, man. It's a lot of the stuff that comes up in men's work. We're not here to do it by ourselves. You can't survive a relationship if you just try to do it by yourself with your partner behind closed doors. It's not the way we're meant to do this. We're meant to do it in community to support each other. And that's why being stuck indoors is so hard. Even instinctually, men go with the men and women go with the women to get the support we need so that we can go back to the relationship and try and figure it out. And when our lifeline there has been cut off, we got to get more creative, got to figure something else out.
Yeah. So what kind of happens in a relationship coaching session?
Oh man. Well, let me think to the last one that we had.
I mean, you of course don't have to divulge anything personal.
Oh no. I mean, this is the work that we do. You know, it's all about vulnerability and transparency. You know, the big thing for us was taking the time to really see one another. And when I say see one another, to actually, for me, to pause, to slow down, and to listen to what my wife was feeling, what she was experiencing, and to have this other party, right? To have Erica sitting there on the other side of the screen saying, "Hold on a second, Jeddy, did you hear that? Did you hear what Carrie said right there? Did you miss?" And then repeating it back to her, and really just having somebody navigate a deeper level of listening for each other. Because what happens in relationship, what I've noticed working with a lot of men and in my own relationship, is that when breakdowns start to happen, our survival brain flips on and I start thinking about myself. I start thinking about, what do I need? How do I want this situation to go? And then my needs and my wants trigger the same thing in my partner. And then we just trigger each other back and forth until we're on completely opposite sides of the room. We're not on the same team anymore. We're not in relationship anymore. We're competing for resources.
Right.
And so working with someone like a coach is just helping you get back on the same team. Really, in the simplest sense, reminding you why you love the other person. I mean, she just had us pause long enough to look each other in the eyes and say what we love about the other person. Like something so simple like that.
That's awesome.
Such a long way.
Yeah. And you're so right. That is definitely something that just kind of left around ice it's not something we're taught. So it's not natural, because I think what's important that you mentioned is that as soon as we go into that kind of triggered state where it's like, oh, okay, now my defenses come up,
Mhm.
because like the ego has an incredible purpose to it. The ego is there to defend yourself. It's to protect yourself. So as long as it's in a healthy state, ego's fine. But
Mhm.
as soon as that ego starts to feel hurt or scorned, that's when the defense mechanisms come in. And
Mhm.
we go back to like kind of the old primal brain of fight, flight, freeze, or appease kind of activation. And then it's trying to get back from that. That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, my heart goes out to the people who have been in long-term relationships for a long time. And the longer you've been in a relationship, the better you get at finding where your partner's buttons are. We
Mhm.
kind of learn where to poke. We know my wife knows exactly where to poke, whether she does it consciously or unconsciously, and I do the same thing because we know that's what's going to get a reaction out of the other person. But of
Mhm.
course, that only happens in a time where I'm wanting something to go a certain way for me. I'm
Mhm.
not thinking about her. My greatest mission in my life is to be able to make my life about the people around me, to consider them first and not worry about my needs being met, and taking care of my own needs so that I don't have to worry so much about that. And there's so many people who've been doing it for decades. I think about my parents. They're married. They've been married 35 years, I think now.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I know that they're still stuck in some really of similar patterns.
Mhm.
So you can be in a relationship for a long time and be triggering each other back and forth, but then you choose not to look at it, and you can only suppress it for so long. We're
Yeah.
humans. It's not natural for us to where we need to be expressed and to be honest in our relationships. And I feel like that's something that a lot more people are becoming privy to now. They're not settling for that just going through the motions relationship anymore. But I know a lot of people still do.
Yeah. Well, I think it's much harder right now, again, going back to what we first talked about, which is the going through the motions relationships when you're confined to a house together, that
Mhm.
doesn't work.
No.
Like that gets touchy and painful, and it's like, but kind of like you were saying, when you do the work, it's the pain points that actually trigger us into having something grow.
Mm.
Like, because those deeper conversations don't typically come up when things are just going great. Because when things are going great and everything's perfect and you're having fun and like life is just kind of puppy dogs and roses, of course it's just like, I love you too. It's
Yeah.
when, okay, oh, we just hit a place where maybe our values aren't perfectly in alignment, or we don't quite agree on how to handle this situation. Like I can even speak for ourselves. Like Michelle and I have had to have specific conversations on how do we handle certain aspects of COVID.
Mm.
Like, are we okay hanging out with this person? Are we not okay hanging out with this person? And sometimes we don't necessarily see eye to eye on that. And so
Mhm.
we've had to come to agreements like, hey, I don't want to put on you my my preferences or my decisions, but at the same time, we co-occupy a space, so we need to make agreements around it together. Now,
Yeah.
those are things that if you haven't been going through those things in your relationship, they're they're tough things to breach.
And I love what you guys do there. I mean, that's just basic communication, right? The ability to communicate, to listen, to be willing to listen to what your partner has to say and genuinely hear their concerns, and then to respond and honestly express your own. It sounds so simple, but it's really actually not that common. We
Yeah.
get stuck in these patterns of trying to please our partner or doing what we think they want us to try and make them happy, but that never works. It's inauthentic. It breeds resentment. And so, like we've been talking about, a lot of those, the ability to sidestep or navigate the hard conversation has gone away.
Mhm.
You could look at it as a gift that now you have to finally face off with and have those difficult conversations. And all it takes is communication and respect.
Yeah.
You can be open enough to hear your partner's perspective on something. You don't have to agree. Relationship is not about agreement.
Right.
Relationship is about collaborative effort, working towards a solution. A lot of it's negotiation,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. So have you found ways that have helped you and your wife, or like even just your friendships too? Like, have you found different ways to have those kind of conversations, or I guess I don't want to use the word instigate because instigate sounds kind of punchy, but to start that conversation in a way that directs it in a healthy direction.
Yeah, for sure, man. For me, it comes a lot back to language and how we're languaging with each other. There's a lot of manipulation and coercion in the way we talk to each other, even with words like truth. I worked with a master of leadership, a guy named Scott Cody, and he was a disciple of these generations of guys who really studied language, and they developed something called the ontology of language. Ontology is the study of being. So what it really came down to is, how are we being in relationship with ourselves, the world, and each other by the way we speak to each other and to ourselves. Right? There's the internal dialogue, and there's the external dialogue, and also the unspoken dialogue of body language. And man, it completely transformed my life, because a word like truth, how many times when you really pay attention, watch the news, for example, right? Everybody who's glued to their televisions right now, just watch the language that broadcasters use. They convey a sense of confidence and certainty around things that are not actually based on fact. And they can be very convincing, very coercive in the way that they speak. And we do this everywhere in our lives, because ultimately we want the outcome to go in our favor, right? It comes back to being me-centric, egocentric. I want things to work in my favor so that I can survive and I can have what I need. And so the way that we are in relationship with language is so important. And even making things like requests, and not demanding something of someone or telling someone you need to, even just saying, hey, you need to blah, blah, blah. When I talk to my kids, right? Hey, you need to clean up your room. That's not a request, right? That's a demand. That's authoritative. That's tyrannical, right? That's a tyrant right there. Versus, hey, my request is that you clean up your room before we have dinner, so that in order to make sure it's clean before we go to bed. Real simple, right? So things like nonviolent communication, that might be something that people are more familiar with. These ways of communicating in a way that doesn't evoke a survival response in someone else. Because someone can say something to you that makes you feel like, ooh, like you take a step back and you kind of cock your fist, like you're ready to go. Yeah, totally. You don't know why, right? It's because something they said in their language triggered that mechanism in your brain. So I mean, it's a little bit complex if nobody's ever dove into it before, but even just listening to what you say and what people say to you, what other people are saying to each other, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up something as simple as the word truth, because each person has their own version of truth. Like, we see that all the time, right? I mean, let's take science. You know, if you want to prove that masks work, there's plenty of scientific truth out there for you. If you want to prove that masks don't work, there are plenty of scientific truths to prove you right. So everyone can have their own version of truth, you know? And so I like what you're saying, because if I come into a conversation and I start to say, okay, well, here's the truth. What I'm actually saying is, here's my mind's version of how my mind has created the truth for me, right? And so yeah, I guess the question is, like, how do you kind of enter into that conversation so you don't ignite that sense of, okay, well, now you're just kind of telling me, because we have to start the conversation somehow, right?
Absolutely,
like, we have to walk into the room and we have to say, okay, we have to have a conversation about this.
Yeah. Well, and I got you, man. I got you, because this is perfect. It's ontology of language 101, right?
Okay.
The word truth. There's two kinds of truth. There's capital T, uppercase T truth, and there's lowercase t truth. So uppercase capital T truth are irrefutable facts, things that we as a human race have all agreed upon to be true. 2 + 2 = 4. Anybody who wants to
kill someone.
Say what?
Like, it's bad to kill someone.
Yeah, right. Well, even that might be arguable, right? Some people might disagree, but it really is such a small amount of what is actually of the belief pie, such a small slice. 2 + 2 = 4, right? The sky is blue, right? That there's so few things that actually qualify as that. Everything else is lowercase t truth, and all lowercase t means is my truth. And if I can create a context for relationship where I'm committed to respecting your lowercase t truth. Doesn't have to be mine, just has to be yours, right? You could say the sky's red, and that's fine. As long as you respect the fact that I believe the sky is blue. And we can have a discourse about that. We can go, well, why do you think the sky is red? Right? Or why do you think the sky is blue?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this goes so deep into things like religion, people trying to convey a sense of certainty and truth because it makes them feel more safe in their own reality.
Yeah.
That's why we say things like this. That's why, whether we're talking about bigger picture religion on a mass scale, we're talking about in just your relationship on a small scale, we do this. We try to tell people this is the way it is. Because if you believe that that's the way it is, it makes me feel more safe in my beliefs because I got one more person on my team.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we'll do whatever we can, right? I mean, we've gone to war over truth.
Oh, totally. Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's part of one thing that I think it's important for people to understand too, from a neuroscience standpoint, is that it is your brain's natural tendency. It's not even something you're trying to do. It's not like you're trying to prove yourself right. It's that what you were saying, Jeddy, the brain is trying to keep itself safe. It's trying to keep the body safe. And so the mind is always going to find the thing that proves itself right. It's going to find the people that proves itself correct, yep, so that it stays safe.
Totally, man. I always like to take it back to nature, right? I like to think of us back in hunter-gatherer days. My survival depended on my ability to enroll the people around me to go hunt a woolly mammoth.
True.
Like, hey guys, it's cold out here. I need a warm meal. My belly, we haven't eaten in weeks. What about you guys? Are you guys hungry? All right, we got to go take down one. I know it's really big. I know that a couple of us are probably going to die or get really injured in the process, but we need to go get this woolly mammoth, not just for us, but for our families. Mm-hmm. Right? So like you said, man, it's part of our survival mechanism. The way that we get around in the world is by enrolling people in what we believe to be true. But if what the problem is on a mass scale is that we as humans have become so inflexible in our belief system, we've had to hold on tightly to what we believe because we feel so unsafe in this uncertain world that there's no room for it. There's no room for somebody else to be valid in their beliefs at the same time that I am. I have to invalidate your truth in order for mine to have merit. And that doesn't work, especially not in a global society. That's why I don't believe we'll ever truly be a global society, because there's 8.5 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
No way. You can barely get agreement in a room full of 5 people.
Right.
Right? How are we going to do it on a mass scale unless we at least agree to disagree and honor each other in our own belief systems, And
true. Yeah, and that shows up just as simple as maybe like a friend to friend kind of relationship, because it can be so simple. Like we're kind of talking on a pretty big scale at the point of but it can happen in very small places too. Absolutely. And completely without notice. Like one of the things, Jeddy, that I kind of realized just today, actually, and for the sake of vulnerability and being open, my wife and I, we've been having these certain conversations, and today I recognize too that what is so natural to us to feel and to think, if we aren't careful, we apply that to everyone else around us. Mm-hmm. Because it's so natural and so easy for me to think that there's certain needs even that most humans are going to agree with. And Michelle and I have been together for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And today I heard something that I hadn't heard from her before. Like I was like, whoa, it was kind of a tough conversation because it was uncomfortable how it all began and the things we were kind of talking through. But by the end, I was like, this is probably one of the most pivotal conversations we'll ever have, because I finally kind of understood how I was creating so many stories about what I thought her intent was behind certain things that she did. Mm-hmm. And when she finally explained what the actual reality was, it was like, whoa, that's not what I had been creating stories about my whole life. And
Yeah.
it just really came down to the other way of thinking is so incredibly natural to me,
Hmm.
but I almost couldn't picture how anyone else wouldn't think that way or wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I applaud you guys again for being courageous enough to have that conversation because it's a risk. It's a risk having a conversation. I mean, somebody that you've been with for 20 years,
Yeah.
it's a risk going there and saying, hey, wow, this is uncharted territory.
Mhm.
Let's go for it. Because it's just like working out, right? People go to the gym and you're working out and you're like, oh, why am I doing this to myself? It hurts. It doesn't feel good. Everything in my body says stop. When you're running on the treadmill and you're just like sucking wind. But then at the end, you're like, you know what? That was good for me. Everywhere in life, man, I've found that the most uncomfortable things, the most uncomfortable conversations, the times where I've had to be honest, the times where I've had to eat crow and humble myself
Mhm.
have been the biggest growth moments in my life.
Yeah.
And the thing is that society is set up as such that you could actually get through life without ever having to take any of those leaps of faith. You
Sure.
can go to the grocery store, come home, cash a check, just have a roof over your head and just float through life. And avoid the discomfort, because I think that's what a lot of people are doing. A lot of people are avoiding discomfort in the form of emotional discomfort, physical discomfort, anything, right?
Yes.
So you can go through life avoiding it, but your level of fulfillment is going to max out. It's going to hit a ceiling. You
Mhm.
got to be willing to go into the uncomfortable places, especially when we're talking about a relationship. All those people, whether you're a man or a woman, whatever kind of relationship you're in, everybody wants more connection. Everybody wants to feel and experience a greater degree of love, acceptance. I don't care who you are. And if you say that you don't, I don't believe you. If you say you don't, you're just scared to do what it takes to get there,
Yeah.
And that's okay too. You get there if you want.
And here's another big discovery is everyone has a different definition of those things.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like I do think that everyone wants those things, but they don't all want them in the same way.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the challenging thing really often is we witness something happening, and because we always, let's face it, unless you're Buddha on the mountain, like if you're just a normal human being like we all are, we always have our own goggles on, which is
Yep.
our own experiences, our what we've been taught, like what we've experienced or what we've gone through in our lives. And then, so of course we're going to see the situation through that perception.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And even Buddha on the mountain, right? The story of Siddhartha was he was going through all the human stuff before he went and sat there and achieved enlightenment. I think one of the things that people, and this is getting serious for a moment, because I know that this is a pain point for a lot of people. And I don't want to diminish that by making light of it. But there's a lot of people I know are just scared to find out that the person that they're with, or the person that they're in relationship with, actually isn't compatible for them. And I'm
Mhm.
not just talking about an intimate partner. I'm also talking about your parents, your siblings. There's some people that they keep people close to them because of some sort of obligation, because you were born into that family, or you have kids with this person that you're with. But you have to ask yourself this question: am I doing more harm to myself and the people around me by being in a relationship that I cannot be fully myself in, that I
Mhm.
can't be fully expressed? And so these hard conversations we're talking about, I think a lot of people are afraid that they might find out I'm just not compatible here, that this relationship, I can't invest more of myself into this relationship. Maybe I got to spend less time around my parents, or less time around this person that's been my best friend for 25 years.
Right.
I've got some amazing, amazing relationships in my life with people that I met back when I was in college, 17 years old, half a lifetime ago, and we've invested in each other over time. We've gone through really hard times, blood, sweat, tears, everything,
Yeah.
and built a foundation of trust. And there's plenty of people I met along the way that didn't make it, right? That didn't make the cut for one reason or another. Nothing personal, just some people are not your people.
Right.
And I think that's the hard thing for a lot of people to face off with, because we don't want to cut people out.
Yeah. My coach, when she and I still can't find the actual source because I've heard it many different ways, but she told me one time that people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Mm,
And This is, this is something that Kevin Walton actually, he put some perspective to it one time in one of the classes about that each of our experiences have something, that there's a purpose to everything, regardless if it's the most painful, regardless, like there's a purpose and there's a message and there's something in everything that we do.
Yeah.
And so I think you're spot on with the fact that not only sometimes are we afraid to get into these conversations and to have this the conversation in a relationship because maybe it risks us, but it could risk the fact that, oh, maybe the season is over.
Yeah.
Which really, now even just as I'm saying it, I think I'm recognizing maybe that's even just kind of a social construct too. Because like you were saying too, if we look back to nature, if we look back, like nature kind of operates that way. Like things happen in these like seasons and moments, and there's very few things that happen in nature that have this kind of lifetime kind of span.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I was just talking with someone else on another podcast yesterday. We were talking about how privileged we are in the modern world, especially the Western modern world, middle class Western society, where the infant mortality rate is so remarkably low. I mean, even just a few generations back, our grandparents and great grandparents, every single one of them had a sibling that died before they reached age 18, and usually younger. Right? We live in a world where we're so protected. We've safeguarded ourselves from pain so much. We have narcotics and prescription medications and heavy controlled substances that prevent pain. But one of the greatest, going back, all right, so let's trade quotes, right? One of my favorite quotes ever is that pain is an inevitability and suffering is a choice. That's life, man. Life hurts. I love these Instagram handles that have all of these gnarly nature moments, of like a lion ripping off a deer's head, or like baby right after it's crazy. And it's like, oh man, like that's brutal. But that's life. And we've insulated ourselves from nature so much that it's made us, fragile is the word that comes to mind. I know that's probably going to push some buttons on a bunch of people, but really we're so protected from reality. And the reality is that, hey man, life is challenging. It's unforgiving. It's full of painful moments, but it's also full of joyful moments. Yeah. Whether you're suffering through them or not, whether you're looking at yourself feeling bad for your circumstances or your situation, that's the choice. That's where suffering can be your reality or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how that's put too, because like I'm very into Buddhism, and I'm not necessarily a Buddhist, but I've studied Buddhism quite a bit. And, one of the things that they talk about a lot is suffering. And most people, a lot of the Eastern kind of Buddhist scholars are like, well, we kind of mistake what suffering is, But I like how you put it, because I feel like for our ears, that makes more sense. It could hurt, but the suffering is optional. I kind of want to hit a couple of these comments, because there's some great comments coming in here. Trina said that she has to say that pretty often to appreciate the blessings, which I think that's so key, right, Jeddy? Like, without having that pain point, like if we were all just like eating cake every day and nothing ever hurt, life would just be like this. It just, like, we'd be so bored. In fact, I just had to kind of tell this little quick side story with this, because I was talking to a friend of mine who he had gone to Harvard Business School, this like special Harvard Business School program. And he was in this group with like mega billionaires, like people that just had more money than anyone should, Yeah. And he said it one time he went out for this class, and he was like, Sean's a pretty wealthy dude. Like he does well for him and his family, and they have good businesses and stuff. But he's like, I was like the teeny speck on the map with these guys. And he said one of the guys basically it was like, all right, guys, we're going out tonight. Go back and get ready. So Sean comes back out, and he shows up, and there's a limo outside, and takes him to the airport, jump in this private plane, fly here, do all these crazy things. And he's like, it was the craziest night of my entire life.
Mhm.
And we got back, and the guys were like, "Okay, so now what?" Like that was so normal to them. Like their
Mhm.
life is so up here that those experiences are now just normal.
Mm.
So I'm kind of like, yeah, without feeling this, it's like we can't appreciate this, Trina, right?
And that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they keep chasing that high, right? The
Mhm.
high of joy, the endorphin rush of feeling good, chasing the next feel good moment, right? The rush of endorphins in your brain, the dopamine hit, right? That's what we're always looking for. I
Yeah.
always think about it this way. You think of like that Hollywood moment where someone gets in a car accident, right? Maybe they're arguing in the car, and all of a sudden they get
Mhm.
T-boned by another vehicle, and they stop and they look around and say, "Oh my God, is everyone okay? Are you guys all right?" Like, it takes a moment like that for you to realize that, whoa, it could have just all ended right there. We were
Mhm.
arguing about laundry. We could have just died. And then you see people embracing each other. "Oh my God, I love you so much. Oh, I didn't realize," because again, we have the veil covering our eyes most of the time, giving
Yes.
us this false sense of security that we're guaranteed to have these things, and we're not. So I love what Trina said. And I think it's a really important way to live your life, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of stepping back, but I got to hit this because
Do
this,
it.
I think this is awesome. But Allison popped this in when we were kind of talking more about the communication factor. And I
Yeah.
love this. A wise person once told me mind reading is technically a violation of another person's boundaries.
Mm.
Empathy is better used to probe for more information. I love that because, man, that's so true. Trying to read someone else's mind, that's kind of an invasion almost, you know?
I like that, and I'm willing to accept that as long as the receiving side doesn't expect the partner to read their mind, right? Because I know that we could talk about masculine, feminine, male, female, man, woman dynamics, but I know that for most women, the feminine trying to convey what they are experiencing, it's like trying to take emotions and put words to them, which is very difficult. I have a lot of compassion for that.
Yeah.
But my wife, a lot of times she wants me to read her mind and expect to know what's going on in there. So I agree, man. I think that's where that clear communication becomes really, really, really important.
Yeah.
And the way I read what Allison wrote is that it's not okay to make assumptions. A lot
Mhm.
of times I assume what's going on. I make judgments. I make come to conclusions about what's happening for the person that I'm in a disagreement with. But empathy, I always say the cure for judgment is curiosity.
Yeah.
What is that? What's going on there? What's happening for you there? Not taking objective curiosity, right? Not like, "Hey, why are you doing that? Are you out to get me?" It's more like genuine, "How you doing? What's going on?"
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is tough sometimes because that empathetic path, is it can feel like the slow path, right? Because I think especially when we're charged, it's like we wanna kinda go in and like, "Okay, let's talk about this. Let's
Yeah.
fix this," you know, and but the empathy path is a slow path because it's more of like you're saying, it's a path of curiosity. It's a path of drawing out. And one of the things that you mentioned that the coach helps you with is that true listening then.
Mhm.
Because I think that sometimes we do try, like we're like, "Okay, I wanna hear you out."
Yeah.
But even just how I said that pretty much implies I'm probably not. Well, I wanna hear you out,
Yeah.
and there's almost this implied but
Well,
behind
I
it.
think there's 2 different types of listening, right? There's listening to understand, and then there's listening while you're waiting for your turn to speak, right?
Yeah,
Okay, like, I'm waiting for you to get to the point so that I can say my piece. I'm not really listening to try and understand your position. I'm just biding my time until I can get my word in. It's subtle. We're talking about subtleties here, right? I mean, this is stuff that every single one of us, I don't care how long you've been working on yourself or going to self-development, reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts. We're still human at the end of the day, right? We're still human. We can't extract our reptilian brain that tells us that my survival is more important than yours.
right.
So, in order for us to be higher conscious beings, to be more evolved than just that base level, it's all about me, it's a choice, it's a practice, it's a discipline. And we're not hardwired to do that. We're hardwired to do the opposite. We can feel compassion and empathy, but at the end of the day, our DNA, our biology says, take care of yourself, pass your genes on. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the part of the brain that can actually stop that process and make more of a conscious decision to do something else is the tiniest part of our brain. It's that prefrontal cortex up here. That's like itty bitty compared to the whole rest of the process. And also, couple of things for you guys. Just this is helpful, I think, for us to know, because so the prefrontal cortex is that ability to stop something and say, okay, do I really want to say it that way? Do I really want to react this way? It's the only part of the brain that can make that happen. It is also the quickest part of the brain to get completely exhausted and completely swamped by the rest of the brain. So as soon as emotional energy goes up, the prefrontal cortex can't keep up. If you are tired, the prefrontal cortex is not going to show up. Think about the times that you have your worst arguments, where you think back and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe I said that to someone.
There you go.
It's probably because you were tired, you were already emotional, you were already frustrated. Drinking, funny enough, think about those of you that like to have a beverage or two. Also think about the times you've probably had those moments where you're like, oh crap, I did that, I said that. Alcohol numbs the prefrontal cortex. So I think that's interesting from like a neuroscience standpoint, just because kind of like you're saying, it almost just brings us back to like, look, you're just a human, like, and you're just working from the materials inside. And so there's also that compassion for ourselves too.
Yeah.
That, hey, you know, sometimes you're going to do okay and sometimes you're not. Do you have ways that you keep yourself in that space?
A space of self-compassion, or in a space of consciousness and being aware of what I'm saying and choosing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man.
The second part, sorry.
Yeah, both. You know, I have a lot of practices I do in my relationship with my wife that keep me present there specifically.
Okay.
One thing I love that we do every day is waking up and we tell each other that we choose each other. Like, hey, I choose you today. Because I think that's really the essence of relationship, is choosing every single day. Going back to biology, right? Our biology doesn't really say, stay with this one person for the rest of your life, no matter what happens. It's that prefrontal cortex that you said that allows us to do that. So we do that. We choose each other every day. And at the end of each day, we either offer gratitude, like, hey, I'm grateful for the things you did today, specifically that day, not just like general gratitude, but that day, what I'm grateful for, or what I see in you, what I love about you, right? We just say those things out loud to each other and remind each other that, hey, anything that happened today, I still choose you. This is still what I love about you, even when we're having a hard time. So sometimes we really got to like work our way through that, because we're like, oh, man, we're in a tough spot right now. Yeah. But you can be in a tough spot and still be in love with each other. You know, so those are some of the things I do. I mean, I take care of myself. I'm a big believer in taking care of yourself. I wasn't for a long time. When we first had kids and got married, when you're by yourself, it's easy, right? It's easy to meditate, exercise, do all the things. Once you get married and have kids, it's a lot harder. So I've had to relearn how to take care of me. And so both my wife and I, we support each other in the self-care stuff. I give her time every morning to go for a walk, to meditate, to exercise. She does the same for me, to do my prayer practice, to exercise. And that just, it neutralizes some of the anxiety of the day, of just day-to-day life, so that I'm operating at a higher level versus coming in empty, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So how do you do that? Do you kind of like sit down in the beginning of the week and kind of chart things out together? Like, hey, here's your time, here's my time. Because I'm sure there's probably people out there that are in that similar situation, kids, family, work, all those things.
Yeah. It's agreements. Going back to what I said before, we have agreements. And in those moments where and this is something that came from working with a coach, right? She said, well, what do you need, Jeddy? And I said, well, I need time for myself in the morning. I need to exercise. I feel best when I'm moving. I feel best when I'm doing my prayer practice and just reflecting. So how much time do you need to do that? I need at least 45 minutes. And I love doing that to start my day. Okay, Carrie, can you support Jeddy in doing that? She's like, absolutely. Do you see how that benefits him and how it benefits you when he gets to do those things? Totally. I know it does. Well, what do you need to be able to support him? Well, I also need my time, right? And then we have this conversation, and then she tells me, usually we're afraid to ask for that stuff, right? I'm afraid to ask for more of her time because we're both so busy. But I'm not even considering the possibility that she loves me and wants to support me that much that she'll say, hey, yeah, of course, take 45 minutes. And then her like, hey, yeah, of course, take an hour, go for a walk. I know that it's going to be good for all of us if you go do that for yourself. So go do it. So to answer your question, it's part of our daily routine. You know, I wake up, I'm ready to go first. So I go do my thing while she's, having a slow wake up with the kids. Then I take the kids over, and then she goes and does her thing. And that's one of many agreements that we have that just set us up for success. Tonight's date night. It's Wednesday, right? Yeah, tonight's date night. So we got to have a date night at least once a week, which all the parents out there, you know how important that is. You gotta have agreements like that, and we stay committed to it. It's not just like, oh, maybe we'll try and have a date. No, it's like, hey, this is going to be sacred and holy. It's like the Sabbath for us, Yeah.
And to that point, I think that that's one of the most important thing about these types of these moments that sometimes I think get put on the back burner because we have been taught so much that if something doesn't have a direct outcome, then it's not as worthy of a investment.
Yes.
And so like I have a coaching practice too. And so often my coaching clients are like, well, how do I find time for that? Like the first thing is you have to create priority for it. Like you have to believe that that's just as important to you as eating that day. It's just as important to you as showing up to work on time. Because if it's a lower priority in your field, you're never going to make that time for it. Like time for that stuff doesn't just show up. You know that. And I don't even have kids. And I know for a fact there's no way in hell a date night just magically appears most of the time. I'm sure that has to just become a priority.
Yeah, dude, you got to fight for those things. And I always like it. I always like to say that, your actions are what reveal what you care about. Especially I work a lot with men. So speaking with men, say, listen, man, men, you're simple. All I have to do is look at what you did, because that'll tell me what you wanted to do. We could talk a big game about, oh, I want to get back in shape. I want to eat better. I want to spend more time with my family, but you're not. If you really did, you would do it. So, the unfortunate thing is that sometimes we don't take action on that stuff until it's too late.
Right.
I always say that men are the last ones to find out when their partner's getting ready to divorce them. And I was guilty of this myself. I leaned on how solid we were in our relationship, how much we loved each other, that well of trust we built up over time, and stopped dating my wife. I prioritized being a provider. I prioritized developing myself as a professional. And we had some really low moments where it was like, hey, we gotta pay more attention to us, because there ain't much of an us right now. We're like business partners. We're not even lovers, partners in this relationship right now.
Yeah. There's a song, and the artist is I'm spacing out the artist, but there's a line in the song that literally brings tears to my eyes sometimes, because it goes something along the line like, baby, let's never get that way. And they're sitting next to each other, but a mile apart. And I'm like, oh, it's like the most heartbreaking line to me, because it's so true. Just sometimes it's like, it's just this parallel path that's kind of happening. And there's nothing there. It's like just enough to kind of hold it together, but it's just, man, like relationships are there because we want to have connection. We want to have that passion. We want to have that support. And like this just doesn't work.
I know, man. And you know what the good news about that is that sometimes all it takes is one of those really uncomfortable and honest conversations to bring you right back together. Sometimes that's all that was missing, was just some honesty and some vulnerability between two people to remind you of how much you love that person, how much you trust them, how much you want to be with them. So if anyone who's listening who's experiencing that right now, what do you have to lose to to say, hey, this is what's going on for me. Be the one willing to go first. That's another thing in a relationship is it's 50-50. You know, especially when it comes to arguments, my wife and I, we always say, hey, whenever an argument happens, one of us has to be willing to wave the white flag first. Got to be willing to go first. It's not going to be me every time. Sometimes I'm just so pissed off and I just want to stay pissed off. And my wife will say, hey, listen, I don't want to fight right now. Like, what do we need to do to just get back on the same team? And then vice versa. You know, sometimes be like, hey, whoa, I love you over here. What do we need to do to get back on the same team right now? Sometimes it's just that simple reminder that can just drop you right back in.
For sure. So we're getting close to needing to wrap up, but there's something that Earl mentioned up here that I would love to just hear your thought on, because he mentioned about like kind of calling each other out for the better good. So because I do kind of feel like that is part of a relationship too, not necessarily that like we call each other out, but like being that reflector to each other too. So I'm just curious, like what your thought is about like how do we do that in a productive way that is actually for the better good of the person in the relationship?
I'll tell you what, man.
That one till the end.
You know, I mean, you can see the look on my face is because it's something that I'm still practicing. I'm very much still a novice in this. You know, it's especially when you've been in a relationship for a long time. You know how to where to stick the daggers. Right? We're really good at hurting the people that we love because we know them really well, unfortunately. And I think what it requires is a humility to recognize that, but if not for the grace of God, there go I. That hey, this thing I'm seeing in my partner right now could easily be me. In fact, it probably was me yesterday, right? And reflecting those things back, not to gain leverage on the person, not to inflict harm, to make them feel worse about themselves. I think it's one thing to be a reflector with respect that allows somebody to maintain their dignity. It's a whole nother thing to say something that's going to cut someone down, that's going to hurt them, that's going to harm them. I don't even care. I don't care if it's your wife, your husband, your intimate partner. It could just be your kids, could be your parents, anybody that you're close to. Just thinking about, I think it's perfectly appropriate to reveal a blind spot to somebody, but to do so in a way that doesn't make somebody feel less than. It's not done with the intention of making them feel less than, because you can't control how someone feels. Sometimes people are just going to take it personally, and you can't really do anything about that. But I think we all know the difference. I know when I'm saying something to like sting, and I also know when I'm saying something to say, hey, do you notice this? Are you open for feedback? That's another thing, asking for permission. Hey, I'm noticing something. Are you open to some feedback? Do I have permission to say this? I always do that with my wife, because if I offer unsolicited feedback, I'm stepping in a booby trap.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of one of the things that we learned in my like very first coaching and training course, like just coaching 101, is the difference between feedback and opinion. Feedback is delivering some kind of factual information to someone. Opinion is how you feel about it.
Yeah.
Right. So even that could be a great way to kind of like check in. Okay, how am I delivering this to tell them how I feel about it? Or am I just kind of shining something back for them? And the other thing, Jeddy, that I just absolutely loved when I first started to listen to Sacred Sun stuff is how they constantly say, calling you in, not calling you out. Which is kind of just what you said. Like, it's all about the intent, right? Like, we can have those hard conversations with each other, but are you doing it to kind of like call this person out with like, I'm going to put you on the outside because I think what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
Or are you saying, hey, here's what's happening. Come on in.
Yeah.
Like, I got a place for you here to work through this together.
And it's just like anything else. You got to build trust with that person. You got to give them enough evidence that when you are reflecting things back to them, it's not done with any malicious intent. And you got to check yourself. I got to check myself all the time, because I do slip up and say hurtful, harmful things to my partner because I want her to feel what I'm feeling in an argument. I mean, how many of us are guilty of that? And the good news is that there's always a recovery step, right? You can always say, hey, I said that to hurt your feelings, and I don't feel good about that. I'm really sorry that I did that, and I'm going to do better next time. That's all. Just some ownership, just some accountability. That's all it takes. Humble yourself. Don't be so proud.
Yeah.
We're all humans, be gentle, be kind, be loving, and all of that for everyone else out there, but start with yourself.
Yeah. Especially now, man. Like we've been talking about since the beginning. I mean, just everyone's gone through a tough time. I don't care who you are, where you're at. Like, there's something going on around you that's probably pushing some buttons. So of course people are going to just be a little bit more reactionary. So that bit of compassion of, okay, cool, that maybe didn't come out the way you wanted it to, but I'm still going to love you. Like, that is such a beautiful gift to give someone. Right?
Yes. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's so validating, and trust building too. That's the thing I say is a lot of us are, and this will be the last thing. I know I always have something else to say, but the thing about admission of not even guilt, just admitting, hey, I didn't show up the way I wanted to there, right? That wasn't okay. I stepped out of line, right? It actually builds trust. A lot of people think that admitting that we were wrong or we did something bad means that somebody's never going to want to talk to us again. A lot of times it makes them trust us even more, because it's so rare in the world to see that, to experience somebody who can humble themselves in that way,
So true. So true, my friend. Yeah, Dina, unconditional love, that's for sure. My friend Dina just commented that.
I love it.
Jeddy, this probably sparked some interest to continue to stay connected with you.
Yeah.
Where can they stay connected to you?
I'm just plugging in my cord here because it's like low battery. Where can stay connected to me? Bottom of the screen right there, that's my Instagram handles. That's the best place to follow me. If you're interested in any of the offerings I have for men, if you're a man listening to this, or if you have a man in your life that you want to refer them to, risingman.org is where everything that I'm offering currently is living. I just have a lot of great opportunities for men to step into a space where they can be safe with other men. It's probably what you experienced in Sacred Sons and any of these other organizations. We're just creating a space where guys can really take the mask off once and for all and let themselves be seen, and appreciate that they're not unique, because we all think that too, and have a place where we're going to call each other forward or call each other in, like you said, instead of try to gain position on you, because we can't hunt the woolly mammoth alone, man. That's the real truth.
That is definitely the truth. Jeddy, I can't thank you enough on behalf of all of us here at Zambia. Guys, please, in the comments, leave Jeddy some thanks for sharing his time with us tonight. This was such a great conversation. So perfect for the time we're in, I believe, that I feel like I almost have to come back and review some stuff myself.
Always, man. It never ends.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you, and hope to have you back on sometime in the future to explore more, because I feel like we could probably talk about a bunch of stuff.
We sure could, man. And thank you. Anytime. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for having me on. And to everybody who's stayed along and watched in, tuned in, thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, I look forward to chatting with you again soon, bro.
Cool. Thanks, dude. What a great conversation, my friends. I feel like, man, relationships are everything in our world. And Jeddy just brought a lot of great wisdom to our channel for how we can continue to make those relationships better. And hey, let's face it, like I saw some of the comments were like, oh, well, I'm not in a intimate relationship, but I think everything we talked about today applies to how we work in business, how we work in our friendships, and, God, our relationship with self, right? So lots of great content. So just before we run off, just want to remind you guys, we do have great education coming up next week. We got Mannequin Monday, Transformation Tuesday, Wellness Wednesday next week. We're going to kind of continue some of the conversations that we even started tonight. We're going to have Carlo Novoa and Ashley Moriello on with me next week. So It's going to be a great show. Don't miss it. And next Tuesday, like I said, there's a special 90-minute class with Sam and myself. We're going to be addressing common challenges and solutions that you guys have behind the chair. So that'll be a blast. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening, a killer weekend, and we will see you